Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. My name is Bryan Harris. I work in the Marketing and Education Department at USA North 811 as the Outreach Specialist. I do outreach, education, training, that sort of a thing. Today, I have with me Chris Botting, the Supervisor of the Web Operations Department. Those are the folks that handle all of the e-ticket, online ticketing, the system. Any questions you have or signing up for an account and all that goes through his team. He's here to help me today just to kind of show some visual examples of some of the new ticket policy stuff that we're going to be talking about today. Also, I have in the background Collin Miyadi, the manager of the Marketing and Education Department. He's going to be answering all of your questions as you type them out while I'm here talking the whole time. With him is also in the Marketing and Education Department, Mr. Matt Dodd. He is our content media creation specialist. He's going to be answering your questions as well. So while I'm here and I'm giving this presentation and I'm teaching you about this new ticket size policy, please feel free to submit your questions with the Q&A button right along the bottom there. There's also a chat feature if you wanted to send a chat message to the panelists, right? That's us. We're not really looking at that, to be perfectly honest. We're going to be posting some info in there for you. Hopefully, you can see the contact info. I put it in before we started the webinar, but it should be in your chat situation there if you want to take a look. It's my contact info, Chris Botting's contact info, and Collin Miyadi's contact info if you have any other questions, want to get in touch with us directly. But during this presentation, during the webinar, use that Q&A button to submit your questions. They could be anonymous if you want, or put your name on, it doesn't matter. They will be sort of private until we answer it, and then when we answer it and hit send, then everyone else can see it, because it probably benefit more than just yourself, right? A lot of people have the same question. So if there's nothing else, I don't know if Collin or Chris or Matt, if you want to just chime in and say hi, just so people know that you are there. I'm not making it up. We do have some folks. There's Chris. He's waving on mute. That's fine. We'll bring him in here.
Unmuting now. I'll say
There he
hello.
is.
Hey, everybody.
We'll bring him back here in a little bit. Like I said, he's going to show us some visual examples of these scenarios that we're dealing with. Okay.
Real quick, Bryan, I'm just going to jump in.
Yep.
This is Collin. Appreciate you having me on here, Bryan, and Chris and Matt. Just want to let everyone know in the audience, bear with us with some of the questions. You know, sometimes there is a little bit of a backlog. So just give us some time to answer them, but we will answer them and take care of all of them. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of folks here joining us today, which is great. But you know, they specifically will be answering your questions in the background, and it may take them a little bit of time to get to you. They may see a question that might be more beneficial for me to explain live, in which case they are fully aware they can just interrupt me, jump in and say, hey, Bryan, would you take this question? But also, when we're done with all this shouldn't take more than maybe 35 minutes, hopefully. When we're done, we're going to be sticking around as long as it takes to sit here and answer your questions. So do not fret if you see your question hanging in there for ages. It will get attended to eventually. All right. Hopefully everybody can see my screen at this point. I'm just arranging some things on my side so I can properly do this thing here. And let's get started. So today, obviously, we're talking about the ticket size policy, right? That's the new ticket size policy here at USA North 811. The crux of it, the majority of it, involves making smaller tickets. That's kind of the idea. We have plenty of statistical evidence and studies that show that smaller area tickets result in fewer damages and less confusion in general when it comes to marking sites and locating underground utilities. So everything here is in the name of damage prevention, right? It's all about safety, keeping the underground lines themselves safe, of course, but more importantly, the people that are doing the digging, keeping them safe, and the communities around those lines, right, to keeping all of them safe as well. So none of this, you know, just to put it out there, none of this is just USA North, you know, messing around with your day and trying to make things harder for you. That's not what we're in it for. We're in it for damage prevention only. You can see here, I've got California and Nevada state flags. These policies cover our entire service area, which is Central Northern California and the entire state of Nevada. We have a committee that we discuss these sorts of changes with, and agree on the terms and agree on what makes the most sense and how it will benefit certain parties, benefit excavators, but also benefit locators, etc. Between the representatives from Nevada and us, of course, USA North 811, and our friends down south at Diggler, who cover all of Southern California. They do exactly what we do, but down in Southern California. So, but what I'm trying to say is we have a continuity committee with all of us. We've all agreed, we've all talked about it, and this is how we all think the tickets should be structured here on out. And that does start July 1st. So again, just to reiterate, we're not here to mess up your day. We're trying to make things easier for everybody, and at the end of the day, make it safer. So just keep that in mind. Number one, the biggie, the main star attraction is the new half-mile rule. Now, it's a little bland here, but I am going to, unfortunately, just have to kind of read you what it says on screen because there's not much to it, and it's the easiest way to go about it. Any location described on a ticket should be no longer than a half mile. That's kind of the maximum dimension there. So what does that mean? Some folks are like, where does that mean I can do like a mile this way and can I do a square? And it just means that any one dimension of your dig site has to be a maximum of a half mile. So you could be half mile by half mile, etc. I just want to reiterate for everybody that if you do have a question, to use the Q&A button. Like I said, I see some notification tags coming up in the chat section. We're not really looking at the chat section. We don't have that window open to help you with the questions there, and no one else would see the answers if we sent you a chat. Use the Q&A button. It should be right along the bottom. I think sometimes it might be on the top. It says Q&A. Click that button, type away, and we will get to your question. Okay. All right. So locations must be a half mile or shorter. Now, it does say that the half mile segments should start and or end at intersections whenever possible. Now, all that means is, for those of you that are doing larger than half mile, because your start location, your end location on your job isn't going to change. That has to be accurate, right? You're not going to round up to the nearest intersection or whatever. That's not what we're asking. What we're saying is for those of you doing longer stretches, let's say you've got 3 miles or something along the road, you're going to have to split them up into half mile segments, right? So what we're saying is for each segment that you're breaking up, try and make those segments into intersections if possible. It makes things cleaner, more organized, and easier for everybody involved, especially the locators that have to go out, hunt, and find your job site, right? So that's all that means. If that's not possible, and it says right here, if intersection isn't practical, then just using the same old process as before, measuring the footage, right, from a cross street to where your start point is, etc. Okay, so if you can't use the intersections, then that's fine. Just use the footage description as we always have. It says here also that extending from the road into a property can't go so far as to extend into other properties behind it that face different roads, because at that point you're basically extending into another road or another street, and that's when you start getting multiple streets contained on one ticket, which doesn't really work. There are some cases where you can follow a single line down a road and maybe turn down a different road, but when we're talking about extending into property, you can't just encompass multiple streets into one ticket. Okay, so that's always been the case, to be frank, but just keep that in mind, that you could say, if you take a look at my example here, I have Port Chicago Highway, and you see, if we pretend that there's another road kind of right there running parallel with it, and we extend into property 300 feet off of Port Chicago Highway, well, you're going to be hitting that other road. That's a no-no, right? Because there's other houses back there. There's a different street, and it just adds complication to the ticket. This is a lot of this policy I'm talking about isn't just all brand new stuff. A lot of it is just kind of recapping what's always been in place. Okay, just to keep that in mind. And finally, it says here, if a single parcel or address location is larger than a half mile, then it's exempt from this new half mile rule. And what does that mean? If you look again at my map here, Diablo Creek Golf Course, obviously that's probably not listed as one single address, but let's say that's one property. That's all one giant address. Obviously, it's bigger than my half mile mark here I have, right? This is a half mile, that purple line, and you can tell because on the bottom, 0.5 miles, right? Well, obviously, this property is bigger than that. If we put this in our system, the address, and it pops up as a single parcel, one single address for that whole lot, well, then it's exempt. It's fine. It's one lot. You're doing work on all of the property or whatever the case may be, maybe just the north side. Doesn't matter. That's fine. It'll go through the system just fine, and we're okay. Does that make sense? Again, if you've got questions, jump in the Q&A section down there, type them out. We've got a couple folks here to help you. Chris, do you have a little, I've got a nice little, map image here, but do you have something to share as well as far as an example, and let us know?
I do. There's one thing in particular that one has to be conscious of, and this is going to happen very, very rarely, but I guess we should bring it up. Let me share my screen. It has to do when you think a whole area is one address, but maybe it's not. Let me get to that example here. Oh, geez, they're so small. Here we go. Share. Let's see if this comes up. Excellent. Okay. So as you can see on this ticket, we've got here over in the mapping area. I hope everyone can see this. We've got this sort of what could be an address. It could be a farm, a homestead of sorts, or whatever you want to call it. And this here's the address, and the people that work there, or whoever's making the tickets. Let me scroll out now and show you this area. The folks working there, whoever's making the dig tickets, might consider. Still, it sometimes takes a long time to scroll in and out with this. Okay. Come on. There it goes. Okay, it might consider that this whole area here, here's that property we looked at this address, and the address is down here, the 23050 West Mount Whitney Ave. That's the address they put into the system, and they might perceive this as the address. But check this out. When we go to the parcel mode. Okay, parcel nothing. Let's find this parcel. There we go. When we go to the parcel, the actual property is just this area here. And so that idea of, well, our property is more than a half mile, but we can do it all in one ticket. That's not going to work if the property shows up like this. Unfortunately, you're still going to have to make a separate ticket for all of this land here, even if you sort of understand this all to be one address. I hope that's clear. Bryan, can you maybe help me express that a little bit better?
No, that's great. So the big takeaway here is that all of us, us included, when we put this ticket in for you, and you folks that maybe are doing this online yourself, the takeaway here is that we're all kind of a slave to the system here. Whatever the data on our system says is the parcel, is what we have to go by. So yeah, the real world, maybe that giant parcel is the address that's legally, it's in the tax code or whatever you want to call it. That's the address. We can't go by that because the mapping data shows us that the address in our map anyway is literally just that one little patch, and that's what we have to go with. So if the case were, as Chris was saying, you're actually working that entire area, we would just have to do that as separate tickets, and we'd have to mark it out as normal. I see a question in here, Chris, if you're all finished up with that.
Absolutely.
I see a question here that says, if we, it kind of follows a little bit on what I had mentioned briefly earlier, so let me go over it again. It says, is the half mile the maximum? Like if it says, if I have a site that's a half mile by 1 mile, do I need 2 tickets? And the short answer is yes, because the maximum dimension that you can have is a half mile. So again, if you want to do half mile by half mile, that's fine. You do a half mile square. But if one of those dimensions is a mile, that's going to break out of the half mile restriction. Does that make sense? All right, so moving on here, I think we've got the half mile rule down pretty well, I would think, I hope. If I was in the right screen, this might work, wouldn't it? There we go. Now we have the 2 mile rule. So there is a little bit of an exception, which is great. It's not all just a half mile. There's a few circumstances where we can go up to 2 miles. And that is specifically if that work is on or alongside a freeway, railroad tracks, waterways, and maybe a pole corridor or a pipeline right away in a rural area only. So in all cases, if you're working on a freeway, railroad tracks, or waterways, like you're going in that direction. In the case of waterways, maybe you're cleaning out the spillway or maintaining the aqueduct road or whatever it is. You can go a maximum of 2 miles. Same thing with the freeway and with railroad tracks. You're laying a utility line along railroad tracks for 14 miles. Well, you can break them up and do 2 mile segments as opposed to half mile segments. Now, a freeway does have a definition. It is a highway that has on ramps and off ramps. So we have to follow that definition when we create these tickets. These 2 mile segments, and quickly going back to the pole corridors and pipeline right-of-ways, those are kind of guidances, right? We're using that as a kind of a reference point. So it's not necessarily saying, oh, we're putting up poles. It's saying I'm following the poles. I'm putting a communication line along these poles, and I'm following the poles wherever they go for the next, again, 14 miles, let's say. Well, then you can use the 2-mile segments. Hopefully that's pretty clear, because there's another little section a little bit later where we talk about actually installing poles or maintaining them, whatever the case may be. That might be slightly different. Now, a 2-mile segment should start and or end at the on-ramps and the off-ramps, if possible, or mile markers or cross streets. So a couple of notes there. It's the same thing as the intersection situation we talked about with the half mile. If you can, split them up such that each ticket ends and starts at an on-ramp or off-ramp. That just makes it cleaner, more well organized, easier for the locator to find you, etc. That's not always going to be the case. If that can't work out, or that doesn't work for you, then of course, as it says here, you can use the footage, as we always have, to find your start point and then your end point with the distance and the direction, etc. Now, mile markers, special note on that one. In California, you can use mile markers. You can add that to your location description and say, the work starts at mile marker 15 or whatever, but we still need that distance and direction from a cross street to that place. We can't rely solely on the mile marker. In Nevada, it's a different story. In Nevada, we are allowed to use just the mile marker. They don't need to give us a distance and a direction to that mile marker and then do their work. They can simply say, starts at mile marker 15, goes to mile marker 18, or what have you. Okay, just want to clear that up. And finally, it says cross streets. Now, when you think of cross streets and freeways, there aren't many, right? The only real cross streets should be on-ramps and off-ramps. But if you look at it from a top-down approach, a 2D map, right? Two-dimensional map, which is what we use when we create these tickets. Anything that overlays or crosses under, crosses through the freeway is going to be considered a cross street. Now, maybe it's an overpass bridge situation and it's underneath it. It's not a real intersection. We know that, but it doesn't matter. We're looking at it from a two-dimensional map perspective. To us, that's considered a cross street, and we can use that as reference points as far as creating your ticket. So I just wanted to clear that up, make sure everybody was aware of that. Okay. Sorry, Chris, you have an example for this one too, don't you?
I do, yeah. This one's fairly self-explanatory, but let's just take a quick look at where is my, there it is, waterway here. So here's a real quick example of something that could be a 2-mile ticket for sure. Here we've got the California Aqueduct here, and just a waterway, just one example. I'm going to do another example along the road here. But if I was doing a 2-mile stretch, I could simply give a distance and direction to my start point. If some of you want to check out the wording here, that might give you some idea what I'm talking about. But get a distance and direction to my start point, and then I'm gonna measure out my ticket. Oh, lost my distance tool there. There it is. And I'm gonna measure along here. And here's conveniently a mile right here at this road here, West Laguna. But I can get 2 miles on this ticket. So I'm gonna go all the way down to, well, I didn't make it quite to the next road, but my ticket's gonna end up here. And this is a really good example, by the way, of sometimes these cross streets or exit ramps or whatever don't really line up where you'd like them to be able to do that thing that we're suggesting, like try to break them up by cross streets or whatnot. So be it. So this ticket's going to end here, and I'm going to say 2 miles southwest, or rather, excuse me, southeast along the aqueduct. My next ticket is going to have to have a distance and direction to my start point here, and then I can do another 2 miles and so on. If getting back to our start point here, if we conveniently have work that's going along a road, like say a pipeline going on the road, that's just the perfect opportunity to use that cross street, starting and stopping at a cross street. That's a mile there, I believe. And then, then you've got, this one kind of gets broken up by the aqueduct, but we can move over to streets that are more conveniently in a grid situation there. This would be a great example of when you'd want to start and stop your tickets along cross streets whenever possible.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. So hopefully that's clear for everybody. There's a question here that is a pretty good one. It says, does it have to be man-made, or can they be natural waterways like rivers and streams? As far as I know, as far as I've been told, any kind of waterway should suffice. If it's a river, or if you're following some kind of some sort of a, what's the right word? Geographically water feature, a geographic water feature. Okay. If it's man-made or naturally occurring, I do not think should matter. All right. So let me put my screen back up on here. Now, we've got 2 miles down, 2-mile rule. Intermittent locations. So I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. You can submit what are called intermittent type locations along a road for street signs or power poles or trees. You're going to plant some trees or something like that. If the distance between each of those locations is specified. So this is pretty much how we've always done things, by the way. This isn't a groundbreaking new policy. This is always how it's been. You define what location number 1 is. You say distance and direction from such and such street starts here, 500 feet. And then from there, we go 200 feet to the next one. Then from there, we go 300 feet north to the next one, etc., to all your different locations. If you see here my little picture, you see that blue purplish line underneath there, and all those footages kind of marked out. They're all different feet, but they are specified. And I want to bring this up because there was an earlier version of this policy that went out that had the language of equidistant. Like you could do that, but they all had to be the same distance apart. And that was false. That was a mistake. That is not accurate. They can be any distance apart so long as it fits the half-mile maximum rule, and that the different distances are specified. It does have to be written out in the location description. It says that the number of locations should be specified on the ticket, and they should be marked appropriately in the field. So obviously, when all of this stuff we talk about, when you're marking your sites, when you're calling in your tickets, you need to be pre-marking your dig site in white first, beforehand. In the case of intermittent locations, that means marking each, say, power pole location, where each one is going to go, etc. Okay. Now, there are some intermittent locations that are very close together. Great example, fence posts, as it says right there in the text. If you have something like fence posts, okay, that's not a continual trench, right? You're not having one continuous hole open in the ground, but because they're so close together, you can consider that a continuous location and just say work starts here, work ends here. Does that make sense? I can't give you a specific, well, what's the footage that makes that count? I mean, use your judgment. We're using fence posts as an example, so use that as your example. All right. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think we had a example for this one, did we, Chris? Or
we did not. I think we felt this one was fairly self-explanatory.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. And again, a lot of this stuff is old news. This is how the policy's always been. We're just kind of giving it a refresh and adding that half-mile and 2-mile rule. Now, bounded areas. Bounded areas are locations that cannot contain any named public streets. Again, this is an old rule. This is the way it's always been. So if there's any internal roads, a bounded area, which Chris will show you in a minute, is basically just boxing off an area, most commonly for new developments, right? If there's new home development and you're laying down a bunch of fiber throughout the whole neighborhood before it's even built, that kind of a thing. But if there are private roadways, fire trails, driveways, internal roads, or anything else in there that doesn't have a name, they're unnamed roads, then it's exempt, and you don't have to worry about it. Those don't count as real roads, okay? And again, we're kind of a slave to our own system here. We have to look at our map data and see if it has a name or not. If it's named in our system, then we have to go with that. There's a small exception to that, which we'll touch on in just one second. But bounded area locations cannot contain any other public or named streets within it, because then at that point you're just including a whole bunch of streets on one ticket, and that just makes things more complicated. What have you got there for us, Chris? I know you have a great great image here.
That here. Here we go. Okay, so here we are in Nevada. This is one of the most troublesome, or I say difficult, things that people encounter when they're working in new developments, and we're very sympathetic to how tricky that can be to Start my video. Okay. Really sympathetic to how tricky this can be. So I'm going to sort of use this one area as an example. Let's say we've got a new development going in here. Hopefully you can all see my cursor moving around. And at the same time, now in this instance, you can see all these houses already here, but I just thought this was a nice example because you got an open area here and some roads. But let's say these houses aren't all here. In fact, there's still, these roads all are named here. There's all named roads that are on Google and you could drive out there and see them, but there's just still a ton of work going on, lots of empty lots. And let's say you've got some grading and some general work going on here. The way this is written, the maker of this ticket is saying, we're going to start at about a point about 600 feet south of here. And then we're working all this area, basically, is what that description above says. Well, as logical as that may seem, because you got all this work going on, and this is, again, as Bryan was saying, this is not news. This is how it's always been. But you can't do the ticket with all these existing roads in it. This would have to be a ticket up here. And if you got work in here, then, well, here's your bounded area here with this section, and here's a bounded area over here. And that's just unfortunately how that has to be. It does make it better for locators. It makes it better for your workflow, probably in the long run. But we just, we just want to make it clear that that hasn't changed. A bounded area cannot contain already established roads. There was a comment in that thing that Bryan was showing about, say, unnamed roads, like farm roads or whatnot. If this was some kind of possibly an agricultural ticket, and this is a field, and let's just imagine this little, waterway here is not a good example, but a farm road running through, just basically an access road. It might even have a name, might have a local name or something like that. That's fine. You could do a field ticket. Oh, my system's being slow. My apologies.
Just so long as it doesn't have a name in our system, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, actually, I've sometimes it's really clear in our system that it's just a small farm access road. You can tell it's a dirt road from the aerial. And we're, at least as far as the online made tickets go, if it's fairly self-evident, that's just a farm road or something like that, or an access road, then that's totally okay. If this was your field and you had some kind of, clearly an access road of some kind, you definitely go ahead and make that a whole area. Obviously it's got to fall within that rule, the half-mile rule, but otherwise that's fine. It's just these proper named roads that really just can't go into a bounded area.
Right. So the bottom line is one of the core kind of aspects of the ticket size policy, which has always been the case, is, like I mentioned earlier, multiple, encompassing multiple streets on one ticket is not really usually ever going to work. There are some instances, like I did say, if you want to zoom in, I don't know if you can zoom in there a little bit, Chris, if you start, following one road, and you can maybe turn and go down a road, but you can't branch off and take multiple streets and add them to a ticket. We've never been able to do that. So at least
we did this example in the last one on Tuesday too. That's a great point, Bryan. We're not saying you can't be working along a road. Say you've got road work here and the road work turns and goes down here. Yeah, you got two roads in there, but that's fine because that's an actual road work.
One continuous location. But then if you were to, to stop and say branch off of this side and then turn and go down this other 4th Street and then this one, then it gets too much and that's not going to happen. Absolutely. All right, Chris, I appreciate it. I am going to switch back over here. Now, I'm going to find my little clicker here. So that's bounded areas. Now, there are some exceptions to these rules that we were talking about, which, of course, everyone needs to know. The Center Operations Supervisor staff might or may allow exemptions to any one of these rules when warranted. So just be aware. We don't want to see no one's getting special treatment or anything like that. Just be aware that maybe there's a special case for this situation. If you see someone else's ticket, maybe there was a special situation there where it had to be exempt. So just keep that in mind. There's no favorites, that's for sure. All tickets that fall outside of these rules have been pre-approved. Again, just keep that in mind. If you have any issues, get in touch with us. Let's see what we can see. Existing tickets issued prior to the effective date. So that's July 1st. Any tickets you have now before this July 1st start of the new policy don't need to be canceled and resubmitted. Okay, they're grandfathered in. Everything's going to be fine there. You can keep them going. All right. If it expires and you have to, quote, renew it, technically, when that happens, every single day of the week, when that happens, we're technically just creating a new ticket anyway. So at that point, if it is expired and you're trying to get it, quote, I say quote unquote renew because it's not really renewal. You're basically trying to start that ticket again or create a new ticket. Then the new policy would fall into place because you are technically creating a new ticket at that point. If it's not expired and you're just renewing it, then you should be fine, and it will we'll renew that for you before it is expired. It'll be grandfathered. Hope that makes sense. Existing tickets. Now, this is kind of in response to the bounded area stuff we talked about. Again, it's really more geared towards maybe those larger like home development type areas. I wouldn't say this happens very often, but just so that you are aware, if you have a ticket where there were no street names present when the ticket was made, right? We did a bounded area like Chris showed, and there's no street names in there. But then after a map update, street names show up, and you need to renew that ticket or whatever the case may be, that ticket will be considered grandfathered in if those roads aren't physically there yet. So really what that means is this is a case of where our map data was updated before the physical roads were put in. Not a common occurrence, let me tell you. Usually the maps are a little bit further behind than where the physical roads are, right? So, but in this case, if you had a situation where you bounded out an area, there was 0 roads in there, and then come to find out 30 days later or whatever, the map shows the streets in there, and you say, well, hold on, there are no streets out here yet. They're not even built yet. I need I need to keep my ticket with that bounded area. There'll be no problem. You'll be grandfathered in. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. All right, how does this help me? So this is geared towards the excavators, right? Because I get it on the surface, on the paper, it sounds like, well, thanks a lot. Now all my tickets can only go half mile. It sounds like a whole lot of extra work. And I sympathize. I understand that. But in reality, when you look at the benefits and how this can actually help you, especially as far as safety is concerned and organization and just keeping things clean, this is going to be a lot better. Yeah, okay, at the end of the day, maybe you have to submit a couple of extra tickets. I mean, to be honest, that's not that big of extra workload, right? It's simply breaking things up and making things a little bit easier to access and a little bit easier to get done and get your jobs done on time and get them done quicker. So how does this help me? Like I said, we have a committee that discusses these things and decides on them and agrees to them. So again, these aren't just created to ruin your day. These are here for a reason. They're here for damage prevention. And we've gotten feedback and input from excavators, large contractors, small utility companies as well, and to figure out where the middle ground is and where it works for everybody. And this is what we have been told. Breaking up your project into smaller parts. If there is any delay or forbid any kind of a damage, it would only affect one portion of your job site instead of the entire project. So think about that. If you've got 3 miles going, right, you have a 3-mile job you got to do. If you didn't break it up into smaller tickets because somehow you got through the system, or this was last year or something, you just made a big long 3-mile ticket, excuse me, and there was a delay. One of the utility companies, I mean, we all know what happens in the real world. Delays happen. It's just a part of it. All right. I mean, I don't want to throw blame on one person or the other, but sometimes maybe there's a malfunctioning locator equipment, or there's just an issue and there's a delay. Well, you legally can't start your job until you have received a response from everybody on your ticket. So what does that mean? That one locator or that one utility company that had an issue and has a delay means you can't start anywhere on your job. That whole 3 miles, you're stuck. You got to wait until they get to you. Now, if it was broken up, half-mile segments, right? That's 6 different tickets. If let's say the one that was delayed, let's say it was a water company. I don't want to pick on the water company, but let's just put them out there as an example. They were the ones that maybe there's a malfunctioning piece of locator equipment or something. They couldn't do it on time. But it turns out that their utility is only in the 3rd parcel, the 3rd ticket. Tickets 1 and 2, tickets 4 and 5, they're all fine. It's the 3rd ticket they were unable to get to. Well, that one's delayed. But you can start tickets 1, start tickets 2. You see how you can get your jobs moving, get them going faster because you've broken it up. Any kind of delay or a damage. If there's a damage, what do you think happens? You got to shut down that job site. You can't work there. if you've got another ticket that's 500 feet or half mile away, whatever it is, a half mile away on a different ticket, no damage there, you're good to go. You can probably continue working there. Every situation is different, so don't quote me, but that's the idea. It allows for more flexibility in getting the marks done. So like I said, you get started while marks are being called in for another section. Hopefully this will lead to a little bit of better organization, a little bit better control over when you start your digs and when you call in your tickets. Let's say you get started on ticket number 1, maybe ticket number 2, and you find out, okay, I'm going in a linear fashion here. I can't do ticket 3 and 4 until I finish this area. So I'm working this area. You know what? With the timing, the rate we're moving, we're going a pretty good speed. I think we should call in ticket number 3 now. And so then maybe in 3 more days, I'll call in ticket number 4. So you see how you're stepping it? It's a step process, right? That gives locators a whole lot more flexibility in being able to get out there and get your jobs done on time. Because if they show up and it's like, well, here's 3 miles stretch of job site we've got to finish in the next hour, a lot of these locators, from what I'm told, have time limits, right? They've got to get these things done. If they go out there and they say, oh, they're just doing small chunks here and small chunk here, it allows them to come back a few days later, and maybe the last one they come back a week later. It breaks it up, makes it easier. On that note, a tighter, more concise ticket size, that just means your tickets are more accurate, right? And again, with that thought that I mentioned, if a locator has to come out and do 3 miles, we're all human. We know what happens when we get overloaded with work and we're in a rush. We rush, we go quick. Maybe if there was a smaller portion or a smaller area that a locator had to deal with, they'd be much more thorough, able to give you more accurate marks, perhaps. I don't know. Not saying that the work wouldn't be good otherwise, but like I said, we're all human. We know how it is when we feel overworked or overloaded. So having a more concise, more precise description allows the locators to get out and more easily mark and locate for you. Less confusion, right? They're able to mark quicker, less potential for confusion. And again, here, potential for marks to be more precise and less spread out through the entire job. More time to focus on that particular area. Now, the list of the members on the ticket would be more accurate. I mentioned this, no waiting on responses from a utility that's not in that area. Picking on the water company again, sorry, water company people. If they were, like I mentioned, if they were, only out in ticket 3, you could start tickets 1 and 2. You're not sitting around waiting for their responses to get started on your job site. A greater chance of having a single or fewer locators. So a ticket on average has about 8 different utility companies on it. We know that by looking at the numbers. And if each utility company sends out multiple locators, you're looking at a whole bunch of people that you need to try to communicate with if there's any issues or any confusion or any questions. That's not great. With a smaller ticket size, we're hoping, and we have been told that there is the potential, at least, and hopefully will be far fewer locators per ticket, and potentially only 1 locator, which makes things easy all around as far as communication is concerned. You have direct contact with that locator instead of multiple ones from the same utility. Sometimes there's different types of styles and different ways people go about making these marks. We'd love to see consistency in the field, and for the most part we do, but of course everyone does things a little bit differently. This way, if you only had 1 locator, or at least fewer locators, there's less confusion there. Like, wait, what? This over here said that, but the mark looks slightly different. There'd be less confusion in that regard. And of course, like I said, if there are any issues, it's easier to contact a single locator rather than multiple ones, right? As far as the membership benefits, there are probably some utility members here in the webinar with us. Those that weren't aware that the ticket policy was coming or changing or have concerns or anything like that, please reach out. We will definitely help you out, answer any questions you have. Just on the surface level, I'll say that just because people might be making more tickets doesn't mean your bill's going up necessarily, okay? Because everybody's ticket count is going to go up. And the way we do our billing internally for our membership, for our utility companies, is based on a percentage of the entire whole, okay? And if you need explanations on that or you have any questions on that whatsoever, please reach out to me. I'll be happy to put you in touch with our member services department or answer your question directly if I happen to know what it is, if I happen to know the answer. If that's it, I think we're going to call it. Thanks again, everybody, and thank you to Chris, Collin, and Matt for helping me out today. It's always a bit of a trick trying to do this on your own, so I appreciate the assistance. Goodbye, everybody.